Well, good morning. Welcome to our morning devotions. And I guess it's supposed to set some record highs in Northern Virginia, but it's supposed to be a beautiful day here as well. But we just welcome you. And for those that have been with me, this is the first installment of our study of the book of Judges, which is it's an amazing book. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it justice just in these short devotions, but it's tremendous. We're going to look at the first 8 verses here in Judges, but let me just give you a little outline of what this is. All right. The judge is the Sophatim. A judge is a Sophat, and judges would be the Sophatims. And these men ruled by God. They were raised up for specific reasons to overcome specific incursions of different armies, and until you get a king. All right, and that's where we lead into 1 Samuel. So, and the book of Ruth is written during this time too, in the time of the judges. The last bit here in Judges chapter, let me get to it. Judges chapter 21, and then it tells us this, the last verse in Judges 21:25. In those days there was no king in Israel. And this is the big thing. There's no king in Israel. Every man did that which was right in his own eyes. Every man did that which was right in his own eyes. I mean, it just talks about a very chaotic, backward time, the book of Judges. And through this, God is merciful to the children of Israel. That's what we're looking at here, all right? But the historic course of things is amazing. It covers about, let me see, what did I say? About 330 years. And over 330 years, you can either say by inspiration and by word of mouth, it was passed down. In the Jewish traditions, Samuel wrote this. There's nothing to indicate that. It could have been written by multiple authors is the point. It could have been written by multiple authors and then compiled later on, because it covers over 3 centuries. So no one man lived through that. Now, Samuel could have written it at the end of the time of the judges. That's possible, but the Bible does not say. So it could have been one guy, the word of mouth passed down by inspiration. God gave it to him. Or it could have been by multiple authors, and then it was compiled. Neither of these things are significant in that the word itself, the words themselves are the words of God, and they are the ones that are preserved, and they are self-attesting, self-authenticating, and self-interpreting. There's about 12 judges in this, and the first one is Othniel, which is right here in verse 1. Chapter 1. He's a relative of Caleb. All right, he's the first judge. Then you have Ehud, Shamgar, Deborah, Gideon, and with Deborah you have Barak, Deborah, Gideon, Tola, Jer, Jephthah, Ibzan, Elon, Abdon, and the last one is Samson, who takes on the Philistines, which was the most formidable foe that Israel ever went up against. It's the Philistine Empire. All the rest of these, they're powerful, but nothing rose to the level of the Philistines in the opposition they were. And David has to conquer the Philistines. I mean, they're still around. So, but those are the 12 judges. And what we're going to look at this morning is just the introduction to this in chapter 1. And it's interesting what we read here. Basically, chapter 1, I only gave you the first 8 verses because most of the chapter, if you begin at verse 19 to the end, it is a sad scenario. And I'm not going to get into that. You can read it on your own. But essentially what it says, it goes through all the 12 tribes. And what we learn from this is that the enemy is never driven out by any of the tribes, even Judah, the big tribe in the south. It says in verse 19, they could not drive out the inhabitants of the valley because they had chariots of iron, which I said were like the Abrams tanks. That is, the children of Israel, once they were divided into their tribes, and they did not have that unified force as the Israeli nation, where all 12 tribes were going after the enemy at once. When it was divided up, even the strongest of the nations, which in this case one of them would have been Judah, was not able to drive out all the enemy. And it's just important to remember that they are never free of this. And the key words I said, I just jotted down here. When it says did not drive them out, is in verse 19, 27, 28, 29, 30, and 31. They did not drive them out and became tributaries in verses 30 and 35. That is, they taxed them. They used them as a means of income. But this became normative, all right? And this is going to be problematic because this is like what we see in the end times of iron and clay. The nation is not contiguous. In the nation, in the tribes, there are different languages, there are different cultures, there are different religions. So there's no continuity because these folks still live within the boundaries of these tribes, which was always a weak link, a terribly weak link that we're going to read later. That they're just Joshua said. Sorry about that. As Joshua said, they were going to be like thorns in your eyes. I mean, and a scourge in your side, and they indeed were that. So this is what we're looking at. So let's look at the text. Look at Judges chapter 1. It says this in verse 1. Now after the death of Joshua, it came to pass that the children of Israel asked the Lord, saying, who shall go up for us against the Canaanites first to fight against them? So their leader is gone. So they're invoking God for direction. Now it doesn't say who did this. It just says the children of Israel. So in some capacity here, his name is invoked, and now they're doing the right thing. They're getting instructions on how to go about this with their leader gone. And the Lord said, Judah shall go up. Behold, I have delivered the land into his hand. Now there you have it. He says that I've delivered the land into your hand, but you get down here into verse 19, and it appears as if Judah just doesn't follow through with God said what he was going to do. This is tough because either Judah went to war and was defeated over and over because they had iron chariots, or because they had iron chariots and they're in the valley, they didn't take it up, or they calculated in their mind they didn't have to really defeat them because they could hem them in. All of these are possibilities, but the point is that God says you can do it, and it wasn't done. That's the point, all right? It wasn't done. And so it says in verse 3, it's interesting here because Judah, who is the largest tribe, goes to Simeon, his brother, another tribe, and says, well, you want to help me with this, which I think was a good thing. I mean, now we're seeing a confederacy within Israel, which tells me that I don't know why this couldn't have been done over and over. Everybody could have locked arms with others, and remember I said they were very successful as they went about it as a nation. Well, if you run up against an enemy, just ask the army of your brother to come up. If you're having a hard time up at Ephraim, ask Judah to come up, bring his army, and see if you can't stomp them out. In hindsight, I know this is armchair quarterbacking, but there were means to get this done. I mean, practical means to get this done, because we saw marvelous things done by the hand of Joshua, and he would have established a template for other tribes to carry. So these are just some things to contemplate. The Bible does not say it, but I mean, as we wonder about why things unfolded the way they did, I think there's practical means that we can understand on how it could have been accomplished the way God said it. So, and Judah said unto Simeon his brother, come up with me unto my lot, that we may fight against the Canaanites, and I likewise will go with thee unto thy lot. And Simeon went up with him. You see, he says, you need help, I'll come over there. We need help, you come over here. I think that's a great idea, right? It could have been a great idea all through Israel. I don't think what I'm saying is, I don't think this is a lack of faith. I think if you're going to defeat the enemy, use overwhelming force. This whole idea of a fair fight is not in the Bible. There's no fair fights in the Bible because it's God against you. It's not a fair fight. You're going to lose. All right. And the same thing here. We're not looking for a fair fight. We're looking for two tribes with their armies to defeat the enemy, to take the property that God promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So let's go get it. And however big the army is, well, whatever we need, let's just raise it, all right, and get after it. So, and then it says this, and Judah went up, and the Lord delivered the Canaanites and the Perizzites, which were two tribes, these two nations that were supposed to be wiped out. He does it. These are by name to be driven out of the promised land. It says, and Judah went up, and the Lord delivered the Canaanites and the Perizzites under their hand, and they slew of them in Bezek 10,000 men. These numbers in the Bible, people debate them, but we're just talking about these huge numbers, and how you count and how they counted. These things are things we'll get sorted out in glory. But here it says that when they went up, 10,000 men died, which would have been a tremendous battle. And it makes sense when you read the rest of this, because we have Adonai Bezek, and the word Adonai is Lord, or he would have been the Lord or the King of Bezek. All right, Adonai, that's a name for God, indeed. The guy's name is Adonai, or the Lord, the little L Lord of Bezek. All right, of the region of the town. And it says, and they found Adonai Bezek in Bezek. Yeah, well, that's where he would have been. That's where his throne would have been. All right. And they fought against him, and they slew the Canaanites and the Perizzites. That is, they went right up to his stronghold. They went right up to his castle, to Adonai Bezek, and they're going to win. And they could have won. I like the way the book starts, because the book starts here, but it ends in chapter 1 like nobody ever drives everybody out. It's very sad, I think, on one level, when you have the muscle to do it and you don't exercise it and you just tolerate it, or you'd rather not go to war because it's too much trouble and you'd rather just tax the enemy. All right. The fact is, as I said, the enemy is within your boundaries. Just think about that. The enemy that despises you, who knows what you've done to everybody else, now lives in your midst. And Joshua warns, don't intermarry with them. Don't lose your integrity as a nation. This is all very, very risky as far as the nation of Israel is concerned. And I say risky because we're only looking at chapter 1. But now we're going to see through the whole book how dangerous this has been. All right, that's what we're going to see. The liability of not doing the will of God on the front end ends in chapter 21 of Judges with the most incredibly horrible thing that you're going to read in the Bible. Matter of fact, when I came to it, when I preached through Judges, and I regret this, but I didn't preach on it because of the sensibilities of the saints. I should have. And I'm going to do it here because I'm over that. The whole Bible is here for us to hear and understand. But it ends horribly, this book, all right? When it says that there was no king in Israel and every man did that which was right in their own eyes. Welcome to 2024, right? Every man just does what's right in his own eyes. It's truth for me. It's truth to me. No, it's not. It's nonsense, but they say it's truth to me. Well, you can believe something that's false and call it truth, but it doesn't make it true, all right? That's what's going on here. So let's get back to our narrative. So they go up against Bezek, and Adonai Bezek is the lord of the city, and they defeat it. And it says in verse 6, and Adonai Bezek fled, so he could see that the writing's on the wall, so to speak. He's got to get out of there, so the king's running for his life. Well, they're not going to let him go. It says, and Adonai Bezek fled, and they pursued after him and caught him. Now, there's things here, and I want to read it to you because it's a little gruesome, but I remember when my dad went through this with me, or I heard him preach it, or at family devotions, but when they caught the king, they cut off his thumbs and big toes. They cut off his thumbs and his big toes, and they kept him alive. They took him to Jerusalem because at this time they had finally conquered Jerusalem, so he's in prison in Jerusalem until he dies, all right? In Jerusalem, right here, we're early on. We're just in the book of Judges. We're learning about Jerusalem. We learn about Melchizedek, who is the king of Salem, all right? So there's a reference to Jerusalem all the way back in Genesis. This great city, it's on a mountain. It was a fortress, and it was a great place. Jerusalem is a great place, still a great place as far as fortresses go in the ancient Near East. So they take him to Jerusalem, but they cut off his thumbs, and they cut off his toes, his big toes. And I asked my dad, I still tell the story. Well, why do you do that? Well, because, first of all, he's the king. It's very symbolic. But basically, what it says is he's never going to be able to hold a sword again, because you can't just hold a sword with your fingers. You need the opposing digit, all right, your thumb, to clench it so you can hold on to a sword. And the same thing when it comes to shooting a bow or an arrow. These primary weapons of the ancient land, if you just have to have it in your fingers and there's nothing to wrap around, you can't hold a bow, all right, to shoot an arrow. And so that takes care of your thumbs. So you can no longer fight. You have been, as a man, disarmed. You've been hobbled, is all that's happening. Because he's breathing, he's eating. You can still hold a fork and you can still hold a knife. It's not that they killed him, but they made it impossible for him to ever go to war again, which is a symbolic thing. And then they cut off his big toes, because your big toe is what stabilizes you. We don't think about it, but it's almost impossible to run if you have your big toe cut off. It's very difficult. Now, you can learn to, but back here, that was like the same thing. It was when they hoed a horse. No, I believe they actually died. But they're hobbling him. That is, he's walking now in an irregular way. He's leaning in a way where he cannot stand his ground, hold a sword, swing a sword. He can't swing it, and he can't establish himself, so he's stable enough to go to war. This is what this all symbolizes. You say it sounds odd to us in our manner of thinking, but in these days, this would have meant a lot. It just means now you have been utterly defeated, Adonai-Bezek, and you are never going to war again, because you can't stand your ground anymore. You can't hold a sword, and you can't shoot a bow. All right, you have been hobbled as a man, is what's happening here. And there's more, because they go after Adonai-Bezek, but we don't understand yet until we read a little further who this guy is. He is a warrior's warrior. He is undoubtedly, when he was captured, because he is a warrior's warrior, this is a man's man. Adonai-Bezek, these men are wicked, but these guys are warriors. I mean, this is grabbing a guy by the beard and thrusting your sword through him. I mean, this is what's going on. And so when he's captured, he's probably just expected to be killed, all right, by the Israelis. I mean, that's what happens. To the victor goes the spoil. Instead, they humble him and put him in prison. And it's because, I think, in part of his renown. Who is this Adonai-Bezek that they just defeated? Who is this guy? Let's just read a little further. And Adonai-Bezek said, after it says they cut off his thumbs and his toes and humbled him as a great warrior, as the Lord of Bezek, he says this. And Adonai-Bezek said, 70 kings, 70 kings, he said, having their thumbs and their great toes cut off, gathered their meat under my table. I have defeated 70 kings, and I did the same thing to them that you did to me. When I captured them, I didn't kill them because they were the kings of the warlords of the region. 70. And I cut off their thumbs and their big toes so they could never raise an army. I didn't kill them either. I had a big banquet table, but I was lord over 70 kings that I had defeated, and none of them had their thumbs or toes either. Yeah, this is the way it was. They did not kill these men because it was almost like, it's almost like honor among thieves. Because these men were rulers and leaders and men within their own sphere, within their own dominion as warlords. And he did not kill them, but they ate at his table with the king. Because essentially it was just all kings sitting at the table. All Adonai, and all add your city's name, the lord of another town, sitting at the table. None of them with thumbs or toes, because they had been defeated and they had been humbled, and now they are guests of Adonai-Bezek. And now this king that was able to wipe out 70 was defeated by the tribes of Judah and Simeon. You see the force and power of the Israeli army, and why it talks about 10,000 being killed here in this battle, because it would have been a ferocious battle to defeat Adonai-Bezek, but they do. And we have this story at the front end of Judges, I think. It does not say specifically, but as we see it in the full scope of things, that if you could beat Adonai-Bezek with Joshua off the scene, who's destroyed 70 other kings, there isn't anybody else down the road here through the book of Judges that you couldn't have defeated as well. It's almost like this first passage of Scripture is an indictment of the remaining part of chapter 1, because it can be done, and we did it. God was with us, and we overcame a tremendous foe, and it was just 2 tribes. If we bring the whole force of the Israeli army on us, we can take care of everyone else as well. But the book of Judges is here because they do not do that. That's what we're going to read. All right, let's keep going. He said, and Adonai-Bezek said, 70 kings having their thumbs and their great toes cut off, gathered their meat under my table. He says, as I have done, so God hath requited me. Isn't that interesting? What goes around comes around, Adonai-Bezek said. I told you, he's a real guy. He's not, this is not a whiner. He says, what I've done to all these men, God has now required it of me. He's not complaining. He's not a whiner. He is Adonai-Bezek. All right. Some of these guys, I mean, they keep them alive. Wouldn't it be wonderful if somehow, by the grace of God, Adonai-Bezek comes to know Christ? Wouldn't that be something else if we get there and this king who is the king and beat all these other kings realize that Jehovah was the true and living God, because now he's a captive in Jerusalem? I'm just making this up, but wouldn't it be interesting if somebody like Paul in the Old Testament ends up in prison with him and shares the gospel with him? I mean, he dies in prison in Jerusalem, but he's around the Israelis the whole time, all right? But there's something to admire about him. I mean, he's a wicked man, don't get me wrong, but he understands what's happening to him, all right? He is the king. He says, as I have done, so God hath requited me. He's required it of me. He says, and they brought him to Jerusalem, and there he died. Took him to Jerusalem and imprisoned him, and he died there. That was the end of his life. And it goes on to say, now this is verse 8. Now the children of Israel had fought against Jerusalem and had taken it. You see, here again, this is Judah. Jerusalem is this stronghold, all right? And it's got walls, it's got tall walls and gates. And Judah was able to take that because Jerusalem's smack dab in the middle of the tribe of Judah, right? So they take it. And then they say, and smitten it with the edge of the sword. That is, they did to Jerusalem on the way in like they did to everybody else. And then they said, and set the city on fire. It says they set the city on fire, but the preceding verse says that they took him there and put him in prison. So what we're reading here in verse 8 is that they subdued the city of Jerusalem and then they occupied it. And that is the Jerusalem that we still talk about today, the capital of Israel. Here it is in Judges chapter 1. Before you even get a king, they're talking about occupying Jerusalem. That city that is right over there right now is spoken of here in Judges chapter 1. What are we looking at, 1,000? Yeah, well, they say 1400 BC, something like that. 1400 BC, we're already talking about Jerusalem. And they say, Jerusalem has no part in Israel. It's been part of Israel before this, but specifically here, 1400 BC, about 1425, they estimate here, before Christ. They're talking about imprisoning the king in Jerusalem. Anyway, so, well, that was my introduction, okay? It covers about a 330-year spread. It is a roller coaster. Let me say this. This is what happens. Israel begins to worship, it falls into idolatry, which Joshua and Moses said would happen. God raises up a judge, a shofet, all right, a judge, a shofet. And he is going to be used specifically by God to drive out the enemy. That's what he's there for. After they drive out the enemy under the leadership of this judge, there's peace in the land for, you're going to read this, it's over and over and over, a specific amount of time, and then they are going to fall back into idolatry, and another invading force is going to come in. So it is a roller coaster ride. So here they are, they've apostatized, or they've left the Lord, and things are just going, start on the downward side. Poorly, poorly, poorly. God raises up a judge, victory is won, and here they are experiencing great victory, and then when things are good, they fall away from the Lord. Things go on a downward slide. They go back into captivity, and when they're in the bottom again, God raises up another judge, and that happens over and over and over again. It is a perfect canonical picture. It is a 21 chapter picture of the Christian life. Up and down. There is nothing like this in Christianity in my life. I said our walk with the Lord is like a sawtooth. It should be going up, but it's up and down, up and down, up and down. This whole book is like an Old Testament illustration of the up and down of what it means to be a Christian. All right? And how we have good days and we have bad days. We get away from the Lord, and the Lord chastises us, and then we get our hearts right, and then we experience great victories, and then after victory we get soft, and then we get away from the Lord, and then we were chastised, and then we learn our lesson, and then we come back to the Lord, and we experience great victories again, and then it goes on and on and on. Put your name in there, all right? This is the book of Judges, but the way the stories in here are remarkable, all right? I'm going to try to hit the significant parts of all these judges, okay? But we have to get through the introduction first. So, all right. Well, the Lord bless you. I trust that was interesting. And you could tell I'm all stuffed up. I caught a cold, don't know how. I was just feeling really good. And then it was like, hit me like, I almost thought it was allergies. It might be, I'm not sure. But the Lord bless you. Hopefully I'm feeling better. This is Thursday, Friday. That was episode 115, if you can believe that. We just praise the Lord for life and strength and the ability to speak, don't we? He gives us a brain to think. Yep. Well, I hope this has been a blessing to you. The Lord bless you. Have a great day. We'll see you.